as we begin our next video presentation from the Ministry of Housing and Municipalities, featuring the Honorable Minister Zane De Silva. Following this, we will have a panel discussion on unlocking the housing market. Before we begin the video, I would like to acknowledge our Attorney General, who is in the building, Minister Kim Wilkerson. And without further ado, we'll begin that video. Thank you.
Good day, everyone. I'm Zane De Silva, Minister of Housing and Municipalities. It's a privilege to be here at the Cost of Living Summit. Let me speak plainly. Housing is not a side issue. It affects everyone: seniors, students, essential workers, families, and the most vulnerable in our community. It is the highest cost in most of our lives. This is more than a housing issue. It's a national issue and a central part of the cost of living challenge we're here to address today. Bermuda has around 32,500 dwellings. Currently, statistics show we build under 100 units per year, a significant amount less than in the past. At the same time, homes that are derelict or uninhabitable need to be addressed. Rental listings have fallen sharply. Construction and financing costs are rising. Financing of all projects is challenging. Planning bottlenecks slow development, and our average household size has shrunk. The truth is, everyone is affected. Essential workers are struggling to find places to live. Young adults delay moving out on their own. Seniors are living in homes they can't safely manage. Vulnerable people are falling through the cracks. And even international businesses feel the strain as housing gaps make it harder to attract and retain essential staff on the island. In 1970, the average household had 3.4 people. Today, it's just over 2. Nearly half of all households are now made up of single people or single parents. We know Bermuda faces a housing shortage. But this challenge isn't just about quantity. It's about building the right types of homes to meet the evolving needs of our people. We need smaller, more affordable units. We need housing for essential workers. We need age-friendly and accessible homes for our growing senior population. And we need transitional units for people leaving long-term hospital care or the justice system. We need to realign what we build with what people actually need. Right now, there is a high demand for studios and one-bedroom units for young workers, seniors, single adults, and single-parent families. 2-bedroom homes are also in demand, but 3- and 4-bedroom homes, perhaps not as much. We need to ensure that we do not overbuild where demand is low and underbuild where it's high. We know that there are over 400 persons looking for homes and many others looking to earn a piece of the rock. To close the gap, we propose to focus on 3 key areas. 1, rehabilitate existing stock. 2, unlock vacant idle units. 3, streamline new builds by cutting red tape planning applications and building permits and public-private partnerships. This isn't a matter of picking one. We must do all 3 at once. Our vision is simple: that every resident in Bermuda has access to safe, secure, and affordable housing through all stages of life. This is about more than buildings. It's about equity. It's about opportunity. It's about building stronger, healthier communities for everyone. The government will lead by setting housing targets, using public land and funding to promote development, modernizing outdated legislation, partnering with developers and non-governmental organizations and communities, and continuing to support those most in need through Bermuda Housing Corporation and other programs. As part of our ongoing work, we are putting forward the following draft proposals to guide discussion and consultation with stakeholders, experts, and the public. Return underused homes to the housing market by repairing derelict properties and upgrading units that need minor fixes. Introduce strategies to encourage landlords to offer long-term rentals and bring more stable, year-round housing back into the market. Deliver as many new homes as possible through a mix of public and private development. Expand the affordable housing supply, prioritizing low and middle income households. Develop more age-friendly homes, including accessible designs for our seniors and those with mobility needs. Reduce permitting times, streamline delivery, and reduce delays. Establish a national housing data system to improve planning, coordination, and accountability across the sector. These proposals are not final. They are a starting point for engagement and feedback, and will be refined based on consultation outcomes in the months ahead. In the coming weeks, we will finalize our housing needs assessment. We will launch working groups with technical experts and stakeholders. We will draft legislation and open it for public consultation. We will expand housing programs through the Bermuda Housing Corporation. And we will roll out a clear, accessible communications plan to keep the public informed. Let me end by saying this. Our housing strategy is not just about bricks and mortar. It's about dignity, it's about stability, it's about ensuring that every person in Bermuda has a place to call home. Together, we can fix this. Together, we can bring real relief to the cost of living challenge. Thank you.
So at this time, I would like to invite the Honorable Minister to the stage, as we're gonna ask him some questions about housing. And I encourage you all to get on Slido and submit those questions so the minister could answer them. Minister, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see you all here. It really is nice to see you all here on this topic. So I'm looking forward to a little engagement.
All right, Minister. So first question, how do you address the needs for landlords' rights when rents are not being paid? The way more Bermudians would open up their units to the local market.
Well, you all may have heard by now that we have plans to change legislation with regard to both, not only the landlords, but the tenants. That will be forthcoming in the next few months. I know that Minister Lightburn is, I think, taking the lead on it, but she will be working with myself and also the AG who's here today. Welcome, AG. Nice to see you on board. But between the three ministries, we're going to delve deep into the Landlord and Tenant Act. We all know that there are challenges, whether you're a landlord and tenant. I've been both, so I know about both experiences, and we look forward to that. It's long overdue. We know that there's a challenge when a landlord wishes to remove a tenant. We know that some landlords take advantage of tenants. And we know that some tenants are very, very good, and we know that some are not so good. And so therefore we have challenges. And we know the stories. It could be 2 to 3 years before you can get a result. That needs to change. And that's our goal, to change it and fast track it.
So just a follow-up to that, can you expand a little bit more on some of the changes in legislation you're proposing to encourage landlords to put houses back on the market?
You might be familiar with the refurbishment program we have. We launched that a couple of months ago. We actually got the funding put in place a few weeks ago. Since that time, we have 24 people that have signed up for the refurbishment program. In other words, if you have a home, and what we have done as a government is we are willing to fund up to $125,000 towards renovations to put these homes back in the market. You will then have a relationship with Bermuda Housing Corporation over the next 5 to 7 years, or maybe longer. If the terms and the relationship works out well, it could be longer. but that's what we're doing in terms of putting some of the existing stock that we have back into the rental arena for folks that are looking for places. Like I said, we have 24 people that have signed up, and we'll be reporting on that as we move forward.
Alrighty, so the next question I have here is, how do you view the private sector helping, or are they helping?
In terms of?
In terms of investments, in terms of...
It could be rentals and/or homes, I guess. I think the private sector, I'm hoping, and we as a government are hoping, that especially with the recent importation duties have been reduced, and they have been reduced significantly, we're hoping that the private sector then says, well, look, maybe I could build, I have a piece of property, maybe I can build 5 or 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 units and get them on the market. So we're doing everything that we can to try and reduce construction costs, and that's one of the first things that we've done, which is significant.
Moving on to the next question, how do we address access to financing to facilitate residential development at reasonable interest rates and terms?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I'm not sure if you want me to answer it in this form.
I do want you to answer it.
Okay. Just last week, I met with a group of people in the country, a large cross-section of people in the construction industry, engineers, architects, laymen. I had a beautiful cross-section of people in the room. And one of the things we discussed was financing. And I pause when I say financing, because it's my view that the banks in this country need to play a larger part. They do. We have too many people in the country that have a good income, solid income. They go to the banks and say, listen, both of us are working, no children. Both of us are making very good money. Both of us working in IB, making $3,000 a week each. And the bank want to say, oh, well, here's all the stipulations. I had a young couple come to me with that exact same situation. Bank says, listen, we need 25, 30% down. We can't have that. The banks need to be encouraged to help people in this country, whether it's folks who want to buy a home or whether it's developers who want to build many homes. And we had a panel talking about it earlier, about the interest rates in the country. And I mentioned to a group of people, several groups of people since I've been minister, is listen, why can't the banks look at giving people 30 and 40 and 50-year mortgages? Now you might say, Zane, that's crazy. If I'm 28, 30 years old, 40, 50, and I got a 50-year mortgage, I'll be dead before it's paid. Exactly, so what? That's what your children are for, right? The thing is, right? And it's funny, right? But look, let me tell you all, I'm a senior now, right? I will take a mortgage tomorrow for 40 years. I'll take one for 50. Because you know what? If you take the larger the mortgage, you may pay more interest over time, but what it does is reduces your payments every month. And it gives people an opportunity to live and make it, right? So as long as the bank doesn't give you a hefty balloon payment penalty, right? The banks need to expand the amount of years, give people more opportunities to earn, and also give them the ability to pay off if they work hard and if they want to save that extra money, make balloon payments every year.
All right, Minister, let's go to the next one. To bring more existing units back on the market quickly while new housing stock is being implemented or built, is there any appetite for implementing a vacancy tax on those who choose to withhold their surplus housing?
Well, I thank the person for that question, because we're looking at that too. It's not only vacancy tax for a home, but it might be vacancy, it might be just an empty lot tax, So we're looking at those. So watch that space too. Because we have too much of that, right? If some persons in this country may own a lot of real estate, and they may say, well, look, I'm not renting that out. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that. But we say, okay, you don't have to rent it out. But I'll tell you what, instead of paying $3,000 a year in land tax, you might pay $30,000. So get it occupied. Give our people somewhere to stay.
All right, Minister. Next question. Any consideration of building dorms for Bermuda College students, as this may increase enrollment and also keep students on the island a little longer?
Well, that one I haven't had yet since I've been in the seat. So that's a good one. I like that. I like that idea. Now, we haven't said dorms on the college campus, but I'll tell you what we have been talking about. We know we have 20 square miles in the country. It's time for us to start going up. And the minister announced recently that is going to remove height restrictions. And everybody's been asking, well, is that 10 stories, 20, 30? The minister would tell you, if you have a 20-story development idea, bring it to him. He'll look at it and he'll consider it. Might not give you 20, but this restriction stuff is gone. So again, that's an opportunity, I think. And we know that on the 400-odd people that are on the list that we have, most of those are for studios and one-bedrooms. So it's my intent to get as many of those built as quickly as we can from the government standpoint. I'll take this opportunity to encourage any developer, anyone that wishes to go into that kind of investments, whether it be local or overseas, well, let's consider that. And if you wish to, anyone wishing to do that, wishes to sit down and have a discussion with me, I'll tell you exactly what I think we should be doing and where we should be doing it.
Thank you so much, Minister.
That's it?
Yeah, that's it.
Man, I could stay here for an hour.
But you have been very informative. I'm pretty sure everybody is grateful for
Yes.
your answers to the questions, and appreciate you for your time.
All I would like to say is that with regard to building in the country, my job is very simple and straightforward. I need to build, and I will build, as many affordable homes for our people that need affordable rents and for our folks who are going to be first-time homeowners. That's the goal. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Well, now I would like to call to the stage our final panel for today. But before I do that, I don't know if Minister Tanae Furbert has been acknowledged. Thank you for being here, Minister Furbert. The moderator for our next panel is Mr. Daniel Woods, Director of Compound Property Group. This presentation today is about unlocking the housing market and expanding opportunity for young Bermudians to become homeowners. I would like to bring the panel to the stage, our esteemed panel, which includes Ms. Judy Mabry, the Sales Associate at JBM Realty and Associates, Mr. Alex Takuto, Co-Chair of Construction Division, Bermuda Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Aaron Critchlow, the founder of Bermuda is Love, and Erica Smith, AICP Executive Director of Bermuda Economic Development Corporation. Give them a round of applause as they come to the stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to all the honored guests, industry leaders, and members of the community joining us today. Firstly, thanks for having me, and thank you. It's an absolute pleasure to be moderating this panel with such these esteemed guests to my right. It appears that we saved the best for last, so I'm very excited to get into this conversation. And I'm not even going to, introduce, you see the information up there. I'll just start by saying, over the past probably several years, but over this year specifically, We've seen all of the information, all of the data, all of the forums, all of the articles, everything showing and identifying all of the core issues and challenges with housing. The Minister, Zane Silva, just spoke to a bunch of the issues that we have and ways that the government's going to look to strategize to solve them. The Chamber of Commerce recently had the data deep dive where they discussed and identified a whole bunch of array of issues and how we got there. The Building Infrastructure and Development Summit had also identified a bunch of different things that we need to address. But short story, we have very limited supply and a very high demand. We have outrageously high construction costs and affordability gaps throughout the market. Outdated policies and essentially just a lack of production in terms of building property. And last but definitely not least, there's a urgent human impact, which can be seen just across the island, where there's dozens and not even dozens, I think it was quoted, over 1,000 people experiencing one form or another of homelessness. So we didn't come up here to just sort of give problem fatigue and talk about these are the issues. We know what the issues are. And we're not trying to point fingers. When we spoke beforehand offline, the idea was let's be solution oriented. Let's come up with actionable ideas. Let's have some conversations that lead to conversations at the dinner table, at the water cooler, on the golf course, but then lead into the boardrooms, into the policy meetings, and into actual strategy that can turn into real action. So our goal for this panel is to basically come with some key takeaways that everyone can go and let's build on this, all right? So with all of that, I'm going to start with Mr. Decudo. Can you tell me some of the key structural reasons why housing in Bermuda is so expensive, and why aren't quick fixes like duty relief or incentives likely to close the affordability gap?
Thanks for having me on the panel today, Daniel. Yeah, we're going to talk a bit about problems, I think, inevitably. Yeah. But I guess some of the headlines are, the number one is that we build very robustly, relatively speaking, if we look around the world. And it's something to be very proud of. It's something that makes us resilient in the face of climate change and other things, and clean up after storms and that kind of stuff. But if you took a typical Bermuda home and you tried to build that home in Central Florida, for instance, it would be many multiples more expensive than your typical stick frame house that you would see in Central Florida. And so our cost of construction is high. That's one of the reasons why it's high. Another reason is the issue of scale. Bermuda is a tiny market, and our home builders are not building at anything close to scale that you can find in the US. There are builders in the US that own their own forests. They own their own quarries, and they own entire supply chains that feed into their ability to build housing affordably or at scale. And a lot of our home builders buy their products from Home Depot, literally Home Depot, and ship them in at retail prices to build in Bermuda. And so we just don't have the scale. We're not building projects at any type of scale. Even what we consider to be large projects in Bermuda, 20, 50 unit developments are just really small in comparison to what the kind of scale that we need to really take advantage of buying gain. And those things contribute. I heard snippets today. I wasn't in, but I heard snippets on the news about the shipping factor and how it contributes to, and obviously, and I've spoken to this before, the contribution of shipping costs to big, bulky, relatively cheap things coming to the island can cause that to multiply 2 or 3 times. Sometimes it's way more than 50%. Sometimes it's 100% more expensive or of the cost to get it here is the cost of material. And so all of those contribute to a construction cost that is so relatively high to a lot of parts of the world, and contribute to, use the term, affordability gap. And so, I mean, we could debate the merits of what goes into calculating what is an affordable house, and including how much of someone's wage should be dedicated to housing. I'm going to shoot from the hip on that envelope here and say that's about 25% to a third. And if we look at what the median wage earner makes in Bermuda, somewhere around 80 grand, and you, again, use some fairly complex calculations to say what could that person afford in terms of rent or a mortgage, I believe that the cost of construction, just construction, overshoots that by 100%.
Yeah.
At least, before you pay for land, before you pay for financing, before you pay for certainly duty or any other thing. So we're so far, and that's at the median, so that means that 50% of the rest of the country cannot afford that. And so affordable for the bottom quartile or the bottom two quartiles is just not achievable at any level of current construction costs to build in Bermuda.
No, that's awesome. Thank you. Thank
you,
Alex.
It's not awesome. It's really
No,
bad.
your insights was awesome. Sorry, to be clear. But speaking on that point, Eureka, sorry, would you be able to share some public-private initiatives that might basically assist, I guess, in rapidly expanding housing, from innovation hubs to workforce housing, anything that you've seen comparable in other jurisdictions?
Absolutely. Great to be here, so thank you for asking. So I think what we've heard today through this summit is a data dump and a reality of where Bermuda is. But I would like to encourage us to utilize an entrepreneurial mindset, right, in order to really solve the pressing issues that face our country. Alex gave some really compelling data and statistics, but I'm always an optimist, and I believe that we can solve our problems. So first and foremost, BDC, we formed the Urban Development Authority a few years ago, and our focus is to really try and facilitate increase in residential development, specifically within our 4 economic empowerment zones throughout the island. So we have 2 in the city of Hamilton, 1 in Northeast Hamilton, 1 in Southeast Hamilton, and then we have 1 in Somerset and 1 in St. George's. And the whole goal was, how do we create policies or economic development tools to try and incentivize property owners, developers, investors to really think about how do we crack this problem we're having with residential accommodation. And so I think what we've done is a prime example of public-private partnerships, and it's taken some time, but I think that we really are on the cusp of seeing these policies come to fruition. So the government was very generous, and they gave us $1 million as a grant to be able to do this work. But I can't build a building for $1 million. I would like to think so, but maybe in another country. Maybe, but not with Bermuda's building techniques. But what we did was, how do we leverage that $1 million to make a difference for those developers and investors who are interested in getting into this space? Because developers and investors really want to come to a site that is development ready. They don't want to have any barriers. They want to know that all of the due diligence that has already taken place has taken place. So part of that is market research. And so anecdotally, as a country, we've always said, right, that we have a housing issue, but we found that we couldn't quantify that. And it's really, really exciting within this year to see that there is so much data coming to the forefront with regard to residential development and residential housing needs. The second thing that we did was we modified legislation to make it easier to develop within our EEZs. 1, from a development point of view, and 2, from an ownership point of view. And then 3, what we are also doing is trying to remove those barriers with regard to creating surveys, creating high-level concepts on the development potential for sites within their zones, and quantifying that so at least investors and developers have a baseline to start with. We have identified 46 sites right now across our 4 EEZs. Some of them are owned by the government, some of them are private sector. We've engaged with property owners around what could potentially happen. We've done concepts on 7 of those sites, so we've paid money to have designers develop what could potentially be housing. And that has resulted in, if they were built as designed, around 350 to 400 units, which could potentially solve the immediate need. And so now the next gap is, how do we figure out financing? But I think that this combination of private and public to address a national need is important, and I think we have to take this entrepreneurial mindset to it.
No, for sure, for sure. So, I mean, some of the points, we're circling back to some of the points that were raised earlier today. Obviously, there's a large portion of the entire population that's renting. There's also, I think we all probably know someone who has a property with a unit that is not inhabited. So we need to find ways that give the landlord, and some of the issues raised previously were identified by the minister. Judy, you had spoken to basically strengthening basically standardizing the leases. Do you want to speak to something on that, on how
Sure.
that would look and how that can improve the rental experience for both the landlord and the tenant?
First of all, they're not taking my blood pressure. It's the only place they could put it. So don't worry. It's nothing to do with stress. Okay. Just want to bring that to your attention. So I think knowledge and understanding of anything, creates a sense of security. So I feel that our standardizing the leases is a great way for landlords and tenants to have this feeling. I'm stuck. Excuse me. So I just wanted to, I think the buzzwords I was thinking for is concise, comprehensive, simplistic, and obviously very transparent. I can go back to the first rental that I ever did in Bermuda, and I looked at the lease and I said, wow, that's great. And it was a really cute apartment, so I just said, where do I sign? I just remember that experience. It was just too daunting for me to understand everything. So my experience from day one was this, I couldn't make sense of everything as a tenant. I reviewed the model from the UK, from that jurisdiction, and I really liked the layout of it. I thought it was a lot more user-friendly in the sense that it clearly had sections. So sometimes when you look at leases, you have to dig a little. There's the landlord responsibilities, the tenant responsibility. There's a section on insurance. There's a section on rent arrears or possession and so forth. This one had clearly defined 6 sections. And within the sections, it had subsections. So if I have an issue and I want to look at something, and I'm like, okay, something, my landlord's not happy about the garden, something I've done. I can immediately go to that section and find the, what are my rights as the landlord, this is portraying a landlord and tenant, and see that, okay, this is what I need to do. I also found that, yes, I did find it very lengthy. There's no question on that. However, it had everything you need to do, like to look at for a standard lease. So I found that even though at the length it was very, very informative, and as I used the term early, comprehensive. One of the things that the UK has is TDS, which is a tenant deposit scheme. It's really it's a protection scheme, and included with the lease is a certificate. So if there's any issues with any dispute with a security deposit, the tenant has the information identifying who to contact, and the certificate is obviously in the system so that they can retrieve the particulars on this particular lease. This is an option on going to court. Now, companies, they use various companies, so it's what they call dispute services, and it's authorized by the government, and there's 2 sections, insured and custodial. And I'll just be real brief on that. The insured is where the money is, okay? So, and the insurance and custodial protection deposit, sorry about that. Where the money, it helps, identifies the insurance section of where the money is in the process. And and the landlord and agent, so there's 2 sections. There's the landlord and agent is protected, and they have a section, and then the custodial. Now, custodial is a little more serious, which we hope we never have to go to that level, but that's imprisonment when there's somebody is in serious trouble. So we do not want to include that in our particular. So I'm just going to go quickly through the.
Well, I just want to make sure, we're just circling around, so I'm going to segue over to Aaron real quick, because I know he's been eager to talk about his points. So, Aaron, one of the things that you brought up when we met previously was we basically need a societal mindset shift is needed in Bermuda for both the public and the policymakers. We have to view housing more as a right and a foundation for community and community well-being, not just a private asset. Do you want to speak to a little bit of that?
Sure. I think we need to start with the framework of who deserves housing. So a lot of times we think about housing as this thing that we get once we earn income to provide that income to purchase a house or rent a house. But when we look at the reality of housing crisis within Bermuda right now, the cost of of renting is about $3,000 average. The cost of purchasing a house is about $1 million. And this panel was, one of the topics was, what does this mean for young persons? Lots of young persons have no ability, no future of purchasing a house in Bermuda. There's no ability for them to earn or save when you're paying $3,000 monthly. There's no ability for you to save enough money to purchase a house in the future, right? And so this whole idea of housing being a business, being a private asset that people only able to get if they earn the money is what has caused this housing crisis. The idea that housing is an investment, is a thing that is for profit. This whole concept is causing the housing crisis. So for the mindset shift that I like to advocate for is us viewing housing as a public good, a social good, a right that everyone has simply for being human. And so what this mindset shift is that housing is not an asset, is not a private thing, is not a way for a person to make money, but a house is a thing for a person to call home, a place for a person to live in. That is the purpose of housing. It's a purpose for us to live and be safe and secure in our own safe, secure environment. When you look at the reality of that this housing crisis is causing, is we have the numbers, we have the statistics to show 1,101 persons homeless. We know there are about 400 persons or families on waiting lists looking for housing. We see the amount of people having to pay more than half their wage on housing. We see that housing is the main debt that people have to pay, expense that people have to pay monthly. This is causing, or it means that people in Bermuda are fully in survival mode, struggling to pay for that basic need to just have a roof over their head. And when you don't have a roof over your head, you're not able to cook, not able to clean, not able to have a place to rest, not able to take a shower, clean yourself. There are so many impacts of not having a house, you know. And when we talk about food at the beginning, so that, as they kind of mentioned in the panel, that is the after effect. After you pay for your rent, or you pay for your mortgage, that's when you pay for food. Housing is the first thing that we think about. And so I think we need to have a mind shift in terms of focusing on housing being a public good, just like schools, just like hospitals, just like the road, that this is something that we all need to survive. And this, when we think about that, we can elevate the whole island out of poverty, out of this mindset of just survival, of hopelessness.
No,
So, yeah.
well, really well said, Aaron. Really well said. So, I guess sort of piggybacking on what Aaron's just said and what the minister previously had mentioned, Alex, what big picture shift do you think is needed from a government standpoint to deliver affordable housing at scale? We understand that there's certain costs associated. We understand that there's definitely a need. Should we be moving from sort of government as facilitator to government as builder, or what does that look like?
Yeah, some of our early chats when we were preparing for this panel, Aaron, as you can hear, is quite invested in his ideas and it really struck a chord with me. And I greatly appreciate some of that philosophy there. And I believe as a result that the shift that's needed is really to move away from demand side interventions in our market and really focus on increasing the supply of units. And I'm not saying, actually, take the minister's point from his earlier comments, we have to do all the things. Like, we can't stop, you know, trying to get units that are derelict on the market. We have to do all those things as well. But I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time. And I think we have to shift into a mode where we are adding to the supply of units, particularly affordable housing units. A lot of the interventions that we currently utilize, or the levers that government pull, like mortgage subsidies or buy-to-rents or mortgage guarantees, all of these are demand-side interventions. And what does that mean is you're just increasing the demand and therefore contributing to price increases. If there are more buyers who can come into the market at $750,000, then all those units that are priced at around $750,000, that's going to be the new ceiling for those units. And you're just creating more opportunities for the bank to make more money, I think. And so you really have to focus then on supply and increasing substantially. I think there's lots of, you know, it's difficult to put your finger on exactly how many, and there's lots of variables, and it's debatable. But you know, we need hundreds and hundreds of new units, you know, to hit our market at an affordable level. And again, I don't think we can rely on the private sector to fulfill that need for affordable units.
Yes.
Again, focusing on that, we can build other types of houses, and they're going to also have contributory effects to bringing, you know, the market pressure down. But we need to, I think, the big shift would be moving to a model that looks at creating lots of units. And I you know, I've spoken to this before, and I think probably Aaron's going to go there in a bit. But there are lots of jurisdictions that do it, not lots, a handful of jurisdictions that do it really well. Singapore is one. Singapore is a place where they spend 10% of their government budget every year on a housing development corporation, and 80% of people who live in Singapore live in a government housing, social housing unit. And I think, like, you know, maybe that's our you know, 20-year timeline objective, but right now we can start with, you know, more than what we do. And I think that's where the shift should lead us.
No, for sure. No, that's very, very interesting stuff, and a great comparable, if I do say so myself. Eureka, how can Bermuda move from a narrow focus on, I guess, like, so we've touched on affordable housing, but I think there needs to be sort of a more dynamic housing ecosystem, one that reflects basically, you know, there's a range, right? Like, you know, we need just, yeah.
A lot.
A lot.
We just need a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you know, I do think we need to shift to a supply side model. We just need thousands of, well, maybe not thousands, but we definitely need hundreds of residential units in a variety of price points and sizes and types for all income levels. So I think it's important to definitely speak around subsidized housing and affordable housing. I think the government is doing its role with regard to providing subsidized housing. And clearly, you know, with the new ministry, they're looking at how to scale that. But in reality, housing impacts every income level in Bermuda. And so I think it would be a disservice to our country if we believe that housing is only impacting those at the lower income level. If we don't figure out a solution to provide this whole range of different housing types from, you know, from just single-family homes or subsidized housing, rental units, group housing, shared accommodations, housing for the aging population, institutional housing, long-term care, and the list could go on. I don't think that we will ever solve our problem. So it has to be a broad range. It has to be a broad type, size, income level. You know, we've done surveys from both those that are looking for subsidized housing right up to the international business sector. And some of the decisions of our major contributor to our GDP is that if they cannot find housing for their workers, then they're not going to make a decision to relocate or form a business here in Bermuda. So it will have a knock-on, it has had a knock-on impact on our economy. You know, but I also think that in that discussion, we can be innovative and creative about how to solve this, right?
Yeah.
I think as what has been said, it's not just one solution, it's a range of solutions, but we have to be aggressive. We have to accelerate that. We have to be innovative. We as a country have to have a single focus in trying to solve this.
Yep.
And as I said, I mentioned entrepreneurial mindset because I believe entrepreneurs solve problems. And I think they test, like they go to market and they test it. What would be wrong in us testing something? So innovative building techniques, right? Creating a building technology innovation hub here in Bermuda, or making partnerships with those that have it in other countries, because how can we continue to build but in a different way that brings down our costs in some way, shape, or form? And we must admit that our inputs to our building technology right now, our construction costs, are a huge contributor to the cost of building. So unless we address that, we're not going to make any demonstrable change.
No, for sure, for sure. Aaron, just switching gears now a little bit. We had mentioned the Singapore model. Are there any other international models of housing systems that successfully promote equality and community from which Bermuda could potentially draw lessons from?
I think the two main examples of public housing being effective is Singapore as well as Vienna, Austria. So Singapore's model has about 80% of the population living in public housing, while 60% of Vienna population living in public housing. Their models within Singapore, they offer 99-year leases to families to live in these or purchase properties on a subsidized basis. In Vienna, the model is less about ownership, it's more about rent. So the population pays rent to the government, to the public authorities to live in these public housing. I think there are three key points to raise within those two models. And one is that both Singapore and Vienna view public housing as a fundamental right, something that the community deserves. Within Singapore, they were once a third world nation in the 60s, and they saw providing housing to the nation as a way that they can lift their nation up into a first world nation, which is what they've done. As well as Vienna, there has been long-term, decades, investing in public housing because it's seen as a public good within their context. The second part is they finance it. So they have tax structures within their government, within the economy, that go directly to providing social housing to their society. Within Singapore, for example, they have similar to our healthcare system, they have employee-employer-backed system that goes into a fund for persons to take out that fund to purchase housing. Within Vienna, there is a specific tax that is implemented that's geared towards income, that is added to income so that the whole society is paying for government social housing. And what I think is really important about that is it's not subsidized. I think subsidized has this big stigma around it. But when we talk about public education, for example, we don't call it subsidized education. No. You know, it's education for all persons because that is what we believe elevates and helps society move forward, right? And I just want to put further context into that is that we in Bermuda, public education right now is 50-50. There are about half the population in public, half the population in private. And so what I urge people to think about, what would happen if public education no longer existed? We will see a completely radical dysfunction to degrees that we can't imagine right now. The complete societal order would disintegrate, right? So I think that's exactly what's happening right now. You know, with the housing crisis, there's complete structural, systemic failure within the whole system of Bermuda. And this is leading to various crises out of housing, such as antisocial violence, such as all the other arrays of cultural and social life in Bermuda. So I think we need to continue that framework that Singapore and Vienna show. And the third thing that they do, that Singapore and Vienna do quite well, is Singapore has compulsory land acquisition laws, where they are able to physically come in and take properties, right, to provide for their community, for their population. This isn't the idea of a person taking the land so that you don't have any land for yourself. It's about giving land to the whole community so that we all earn it together. And Vienna has a voluntary acquisition laws that provide opportunities for the government to step in and purchase land. So I think those three are the three key things that Bermuda needs to look at from a whole societal standpoint. It's both individual, it's collective community, it's government, that we need to seek housing as a human right, as a public good. We need to create a tax system that actually provides financing for housing as a public good. And we also need to think about land acquisition so that we have the space. We already have the space. It's not a question of space not being available, but it's about, does government have the opportunity or access to use that land, to give it to people so that they can have a place to call home.
Yeah, someone had just mentioned to me, great points, Aaron, first of all. And someone had just mentioned to me compulsory purchase of derelict properties. You know, is that something that people should be looking in favor of? We speak so much about all of the derelict property here, derelict property there, derelict property here. Some of them are tied up in probate, different title issues, whatever the case, and they've just gotten to the point where they are, you know, uninhabitable. Should the government be looking at putting on a fair market valuation of that, and whoever is the owner or comes forward as the owner eventually, you know, get given those proceeds, and that be put onto the market to be fixed up or whatever the case may be. But a lot of options, a lot of ideas, and great examples that you just shared. I'm sure that Minister's taking notes. He's probably added those: Singapore, Vienna, boom. Judy, why is modernizing and consolidating Bermuda's outdated rental legislation essential for creating a more transparent and balanced housing market?
Well, first of all, incorporating it for modern protection controls. I mean, by the dates of the acts of 1978, 1974 Landlord Tenant, and 1978 the Rent Control Act in itself says we do need some updating, just by mention by that. There has been discussion about the changing and consolidating the two acts that I just mentioned, and that they were looking to change, revise 58 amendments. I just wanted to make a few notes of what the benefits, or what I think should be included in the when the consolidation of the two acts is first of all, I must say it would be a lot more user-friendly. I'm really overlapping with what I said earlier with standardized lease. Again, user-friendly, because there is overlapping within the acts. I would include pertinent links. When I was looking at the lease for the UK, they always had, like, they would make a statement and then they would include a pertinent link applicable to that particular area. And I think for user-friendly, I think that's a key factor. I'm gonna try to go quickly through, but I did attend, as many of you did, the deep dive in housing in Bermuda seminar, and they had some great things in the presentation, and I wanted to just quote a few of them. First of all, I actually read an article from Aaron, which I thought was great, about one of the things that we could put in there is, I know we have our arbitration process already in our leases, but I want a dedicated dispute resolution center. I think that's really, really critical, and I really thought it was a great idea. The big thing everyone's talking about, security deposits. Increase them 1 month. I know that would be maybe a burden on people, but at the end of the day, it's unfair to the landlord, and also they would get more, there's a lining at the end, you know, for that, because they would get more money back in the end. So you could look at it as a win-win. One of the things that we have problems with as agents is entry to properties. We are, although we have to be very, you know, accommodating and work with our tenants, they can't say they don't want us entering. Of course, for repairs, we have clauses say we can enter if there's an emergency and so forth. However, this does impact sales areas. It does impact rentals. So it impacts our ability to to rent quicker and to sell quicker. So I just wanted to share that with you, that I think that's some of them. I'll go through. I also think if we agree to the standardizing leases, we could include in there that it has to be mandatory for agents and landlords, because there are landlords that also do their own leases. So that's a consideration. Now, the outcome, and this is going to overlap with standardizing leases, and I'll just go real quick. If we were to do this standardizing leases, I'm going to jump back into that, and combine the two acts. Less evictions, turnover, because it's easier for people to understand. I would say we should include the information on the tenant deposit scheme. It would hopefully reduce financial repercussions. Easier to mediate, so because it's clearer, it's easier even for the landlord and tenant to mediate. It's one document. Yep. I'm just throwing out buzzwords here. There's confidence and security, and also it's going to reduce the overloading in the courts and in the rent commissioner's office. Okay. So I think are valuable things that by standardizing, make things clear, that I really think this will reduce and impact a lot of other areas.
Awesome. That is insightful stuff. Thank you, Judy. So we've been asked to move on to questions and Q&A. We're going to get right into it. Alex, this first one looks perfect for you. Why are container homes not allowed? Many other countries are using them. Do you want to take that? Because it's not that they're not allowed.
I think
the engineering. Yeah, go ahead.
Just the term container homes is probably a loaded term and comes with some negativity around it. I'd convert that to sort of modular homes or construction. I don't think there's anything specific in any acts or planning rules that prohibit modular homes, and there may be even a few examples around. So, I think it goes back to the question of private sector versus public sector, and whether or not the private sector has the appetite for the risk of producing a modular project, and whether or not one can be done at scale, enough to make it viable. There would be just lots of questions around that.
Yeah, and it takes quite a bit of logistics to put that together. Go ahead, Aaron.
I'd just like to add that container homes do exist in Bermuda. Yeah. So Salvation Army, their emergency shelter or the transitional shelter, has a few container homes in place right now. It's been in for a few years. They have about 40 units, I believe. Mm-hmm. But I think the larger question is, what types of homes do Bermudians deserve to live in, mm-hmm. And I think, as you kind of mentioned, container homes are like a loaded question in the sense that what is that dignified living for a Bermudian? Mm-hmm. Should that be dignified living? Should that be the goal that we set for our population? Right now, that's just for the homeless population. We say that's what they deserve in a sense. And I don't think that's the framing that we should use, that we should have. We should all be able to live in the solid Bermudian quality built home. There's enough money, I think, in Bermuda for us to all live in quality homes.
Yeah, completely agree. Next question. Oh, sorry. Well, we're going to go through them, and I'm just going to direct them just to keep things pushing along a little bit. Please explain how we can have a decline in population by the thousands, but still have a housing need. I think I'll take that one. That was shared at the data deep dive from the Chamber. Essentially, there's a bunch of different contributing factors which allude to the household size right now has come down tremendously from what it was, say, 20 years ago. Whether that is COVID-related, Airbnbs, there's a whole bunch of different factors that have just made basically we don't have as many people living in a unit anymore. So it's now closer to 2.32, when previously it used to be well above 3. And so then if you capitalize that by the amount of homes we have on island, you'll see that, it's just where we're at right now. Many people would love to own their home. Yeah, many people would love to own their home. Is there an agency that offers a rent to buy? Does anyone want to take that? I can jump in. I think.
I can take. There's no agency that offers a rent to buy, but clearly in the private market, there would be some sellers of homes that would be willing to do it. And one thought I was thinking is there a way for the government to guarantee rent to buy options to make it more affordable for people to purchase homes.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I also believe that there's Home Start, which is BHC in collaboration with Clarion, which someone over in that corner might correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the down payment isn't required for Home Start if you can show proof of, no, I think it's Home Start. Anyway, moving on, I'll fact check that.
As far as I know, Home Start is a collaboration between the government and the banks in order to guarantee first-time owners access to properties through an affordable guarantee, public guarantee format. Mortgage. The government guarantees a mortgage.
Next question. Insurance companies are currently requiring houses to be insured for values that exceed the home value. Any comments on reducing home insurance to reduce costs to landlord and therefore reduce rents?
I can take that one.
Yeah.
So actually, this kind of illustrates one of our problems is that it currently costs more to build a home than it does to actually buy one. And I'm sure some of those agents over there are not in their heads. You could go out and buy a home for cheaper than it would cost you if you built it new on your property. And that's the problem, is insurance companies aren't insuring a house. They're insuring and offering to rebuild a house that you lost when it was destroyed by a storm or whatever. And so the rebuild cost is what you're paying insurance for, not I want you to go out and find me a new house, which can many times be cheaper.
Yeah, no, I'm in the same arena. The market value is X, the insurance value is Y. And it hasn't always been that way, obviously. Is there a way for the public to gain access to a list of homes that are under foreclosure? So most of the times, I know I must jump in, I'm familiar with this one. Most of the times, these foreclosed homes are at the purview of the banks. Bermuda, as we know, is a very small and intimate society. So no, the banks won't put out a list of just basically sharing, your neighbor's information, because everyone here, Bermudians, are pokey, and we don't want our business all out there. So it is the requirement of the bank to sort of keep that on the wraps, and then it will go through a real estate agent of any type to, put it up for listing. One of the pillars impacting cost of living is education. With about 50% of school-aged children, just imagine if parents had this, you've moved to question now, had additional cash, they could possibly have funds to invest in buying a home. Your thoughts? I mean, I think Aaron spoke to that earlier. It's a lot of opportunity if we had the disposable income. That's more of an educational question in my sense. So I don't think we're going to take that on.
But can I just, because this is a real issue, but it also speaks, I think, to our internal family dynamics that are currently existing, as a result of a lot of different factors. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if anyone's surveyed, but how many people in our family collectively get together to purchase a home collectively anymore? Is that a possibility, right? Is there a possibility for families to, at an early age, right, or early in having children, think about how to transfer ownership of your property to your children, before you actually pass away, right? Or, I don't know, putting some of your property into trust or other legal formats that would actually save on the burden of taxes at the end or probate or something like that, right? How do we think about innovatively thinking of utilizing the legal structures that already exist, and how do we inform, our children and our families about these things before we get to the point where we pass away and people don't have a will, right? Or estate planning to figure out what to do next, right? And so that's a lot of real estate education and housing education that I think should also take place at a foundational part of people's lives.
Couldn't agree more, Rika. Couldn't agree more. Next question: securing suitable, affordable housing can be difficult in Bermuda. For individuals with disabilities, it is even more challenging. What solutions are being considered to address this issue? Aaron?
within the plan to end homelessness, which Ms. Denise Carey as well as Minister Tanae Fabric can speak more on, the idea there is that there are different types of homelessness, right? So there's not just one monolithic type of homeless. There's persons who live in overcrowded accommodation. There's persons living as rough sleepers. There are those with disabilities. There are those with mental health issues. There are those with a whole subset of various reasons. I think they've identified a joining, speaking to Minister Ferber, speaking to Denise, Ms. Carey, speaking to myself about how different ways that we are trying to implement this plan to end homelessness that meets the needs of these different demographics of persons who experience housing differently. And I think Minister De Silva did speak to it as well in one of the meetings that that all the Progressive Minds had organized, in that housing, with the rising the age that we have right now, seniors have different needs. And so when you're living in this modern Bermuda house, as you age, you may need different requirements. Yeah. So how can we build to ensure that those persons' needs are being met, right? Just the other day, a senior had called me and asked how can she downsize go from her modern Bermuda home to a smaller home or another accommodation. So I think there's another ways that we can look to take on more public housing by offering seniors a place to live, as well as taking their accommodation and putting that into the public social housing space. So there's work being done, so I'll urge everyone to get more involved.
Awesome. A hidden cost for Bermudians is the cost of poor workmanship, training, and builders cutting corners. What can be done to address this? Also, can we extend warranties for new construction beyond 1 year so that builders have skin in the game? Alex, I think you're most suited for this one.
Look at Alex.
I mean, I don't disagree it's a hidden cost, but I also think that that pulls us down into the weeds of an issue that isn't really talking to the important bits, which again, I'll go back to. There was an upvoted question that had 8 or 10 votes, but I'll change it and I'll answer that one instead if you don't mind.
Go for
which
it.
is, what's the one thing that I would recommend we focus on to try and really change something? Yeah. And that is you know, I'm a big idea kind of person, and like I really think we should do two things, or do a thing that hits two buttons, and that is scale is a real problem for us in Bermuda. Doing things at scale can really help, and I think we just need hundreds of new affordable units, and so you should combine those two things and put a big, hairy, audacious goal out there and say we're going to build 500 units in the next 18 months and assemble a group that's going to see how we can possibly do that. One idea, one big idea.
What's one big idea from you, Judy?
Well, we talked about it on the rental subcommittee level, and years ago I had brought it up at one of the agencies I worked at, but I don't have an answer for it, but I think that service standard contracts should be created. And it should be obviously reviewed if there's any laws that relate, such as, I mean, little things like you can't do something unless you get approval from the agent or the landlord, you have to provide estimates. Are you qualified, especially in an electrical sense? Do you have your qualifications? What is your estimated time of completion? I mean, things change, of course. There's weather issues, there's materials not coming in on time, blah, blah, blah. But as long as there's communication between the customer and the vendor. But I really think there should be some sort of a contract obligation from a service vendor. And that is, it's a win-win situation. As a property manager, the landlord knows the expectations.
It's a lot of protection.
It's a lot of protection and a clear understanding. This is what I need. This is what you've promised. Let's try to comply by all that. So I think we need to do that.
Great answer. So circling back to the question that Alex had referenced, and I apologize because I did not see it. If you were to ask for one suggestion on how housing stock could be increased within 18 months, what would each panelist suggest based on their experience? So Alex has thrown his pie in the sky idea of let's assemble a group, 500 units in 18 months, let's get there, build on scale, use economies of scale to just bring down the cost of building to make it work. Aaron?
I agree. I think that's a fantastic
Just piggybacking
idea.
on his idea. Come on with a new idea.
And I also would love to see, Greg Wilson mentioned in the previous panel about the schools that are closing and using the fields for agriculture. I think if we could somehow combine building houses there as well, or somehow converting the building itself into housing, I think creating community in that sense could really be powerful and something that we could potentially do. I'm not a construction worker, so I don't know. But I think 18 months is kind of limiting us as well. I would rather us just decide on what the vision is or who deserves housing. Again, getting back to that mindset shift of let's just create a Bermuda where public housing is seen as the goal. And how can we create more public housing using that vision of building? We need more housing, but we also need that specific type of public housing that everyone has access to. And I think to further talk, I think this housing crisis didn't just create itself out of nothing. You know, it's been years of economic inequality, the commodification and financialization of housing itself that has created this issue, right? And so the only way that we're able to actually tackle the housing crisis is also tackling economic inequality. And so that's why I would go back to the tax system. How can we, I would say, yeah, that's a great goal in 18 months. How can we create a tax system that provides housing or finance for housing for all?
Awesome. Eureka, do you want to add something for the 18-month question?
So we definitely need to scale, and we need to accelerate that as much as possible. And so when I say scale, I'm saying density, heights, all of that adds to additional scale, because we only have limited land. We can't, create the scale that we need at the low densities that we currently kind of codify. So building more in the city of Hamilton. I don't understand why we don't have people living in the city as much as we should, right? Could there be a call for private sector, IB, as opposed to not being in the real estate business, because that's not their business model, but contributing through either incentives?
1 minute, okay, I'll be real quick. One thing I do want to say, which the one thing about this, like getting housing for Bermudians, and you have to be very sensitive about this, because putting them, I just find that historically, and we all know this is not something all of us, oh my God, it's like a epiphany or anything, but putting too many people in one area in what we call subsidized housing, I don't like to call it low income, because that's not the right way to put it, creates ghettos. So I always feel that you should, if we're creating areas where we are going to be putting subsidized housing or affordable housing, let me use that term, that we should try not to overload those areas, because it does create ghettos. And people that are I've come from Toronto, and when I went to York University, right outside on the outskirts of Toronto, there's an area called Jane and Steeles, and when they started putting subsidized housing down there, which was one of the biggest that they had in Toronto, the crime there, the police won't go down there anymore. The crime is really, really bad. So
I just, Mr. Craig Simmons has also spoken this as well. The idea that because of, I guess, the ability of the middle class to get more money, they've moved out of various neighborhoods and gotten into the more suburban middle class type neighborhood. And so what I would advocate for as well is we need doctors, lawyers, teachers, plumbers, construction workers to live together. That's the type of public housing that we really need, so that we don't create those gentrified areas and so that we don't create those ghettos, right? So we need to accept that that we live together. Ultimately, that's the type of mindset that we need to strive for as Bermudians.
No, for sure.
Definitely.
And we've definitely hit the overtime. And I see Shamari over there eyeballing me. So we're gonna get out of here today. Thank you again for you guys' time today, and much appreciated for being with us today.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I want to acknowledge the Minister of Education, the Honorable Senator Crystal Caesar. And as we are closing our Cost of Living Summit, I also want to remind you that your feedback is essential. So please, the back of the room there, scan the QR codes, take the survey, and you can also, after this, those who are at home, you can go on costofliving.gov.bm and you can provide your feedback there as well. And as we close, I want to sincerely thank our speakers, panelists, partners, and participants for staying here, remaining engaged, both virtually and in person, providing your feedback, and most importantly, you're showing up as we take the next steps forward to make a more affordable Bermuda. Today, we didn't just talk about the challenges, we also discussed ways in which we can move forward, from food security and housing to offer some final reflections. Please welcome once again the Honorable Minister Alexa Lightbourne, whose commitment has been instrumental in making this summit not just possible, but purposeful. So, without further ado, let's welcome Minister Lightbourne to the stage as she gives her final remarks. Minister Lightbourne, everyone.
Good afternoon, everyone. I know it's been a long day. You guys need a stretch break? I know we won't keep you much longer. I appreciate your commitment. I appreciate you showing up. I appreciate you listening and engaging as we asked you to this morning. Today, for me, it won't just be remembered by the panel discussions, and it won't just be remembered by how we were coming in by knowing something, but we've actually left now more informed, more committed to our resolve and the requirement also to evolve as a country and as a community. I want to honor my ministerial colleagues who I see here in front of me, the Honorable Deputy Premier, the Honorable Tanae Farbett as well as members, the Attorney General, Honorable Attorney General, and Minister Crystal Caesar as well for being here, as well as our caucus colleagues who are also in our midst. I am thankful that as leading the effort on behalf of the government, the importance that today was able to help us to be reminded of, which is that we, even as individual ministers, all have a role to collectively play in what the cost of living looks like. It's going to be through collaboration, it's going to be through data sharing that the solutions are able to be implemented and implemented well. The summit for me evolved and showed me that it was not just an industry gathering and that it was a message about our future. I feel reassured by those who are in the room, and I know that we are all leaving feeling a compelled to duty. I think the many persons who've reached out throughout today have tried to capture notes and inform the data that we've done. I know that it will inform the data that we've already captured, and today we were confronted not only about the impacts of cost, but also the cost of delay, the cost of division, and the cost of families who fall through the cracks. The Ministry of Home Affairs took a risk in convening this summit, but we leave here reassured by our work. We ask stakeholders to enter the room without defenses, but with decisions and solutions, not with positions, but with purpose. And so I thank you for meeting that mandate. I thank you for being here. You committed to review, to act, and to reconsider what is possible. For those single mothers who live in Somerset or even in St. George's, the farmers, the grocers, the retailers, the utility providers, and the regulators. This summit sought to unpack our conclusions and invite another approach. Today, we have been showed what can happen when we choose to collaborate in the spirit of what is best for Bermuda. We examined the mechanisms behind the headlines, We explored trade routes, freight charges, regulations that may have once helped, but perhaps are worthy to be revisited. We spoke plainly about the cost of energy, rent, rules, and what actually is fair and should be deserved and a right for all of us. Together, we have asked what role consumer choice has also made in our food and goods selections. We didn't just revisit problems, we can get to solutions. We can get to what we believe to be the answers to our problems. Today does not mark the end of our conversation. We have tested our tolerance that we can actually all be in the room together, and so I'm grateful for that. We sought to disrupt status quo, and we have confirmed what actually is possible. The ministry has already begun to operationalize some of the things that we've discussed here today, and it's important that I share with you some of those updates. Regarding the Landlord and Tenant Act, we are in final legislative draft stage, and in July we'll begin public consultation through support with the Ministry of Legal Affairs. The ministerial directives has come out from the ministry, which will consider and also encourage how consumers should be central to decisions made in electricity and telecommunications, and they should be considered for their impact. We are encouraged by the proactive steps taken by some of our industry partners who have met with in the lead up to the summit to have one-on-one engagements and who have decided to, on their own initiation, meet the government halfway. Because we spoke about how we cannot do it alone. No government, no department, no ministry, or even any stakeholder can share or be solely responsible for cost of living, but it is through the collection of efforts and engagement that we'll actually be able to provide relief. And so the ministry has a collated list of stakeholders who have said, we will join with you in support of the cost of living initiative, and that list will be available on our website, we're saying within the next week. And it's within the next week versus today, because I have, up until yesterday and even throughout today, have received further engagement with persons who have said we want to be on board as well. And so I thank them in advance for joining us in this fight. Fight to lower costs and fight to understand. So these early commitments reflect a growing spirit of collaboration and shared responsibility. We look forward to more working with us and partnering across all sectors to build a more resilient and inclusive and supportive community for everyone. It's my hope that this summit presents the beginning between what collaboration could look like, that is informed by discussions and decisions, and then informs solutions and legislation. Today, may we be reminded of the importance that collaboration has given us, that while government leads and industries adapt, the real power of transformation lies in how we as neighbors co-create solutions. In our households, on our streets, in our parishes, we each have a role to play. How we support our local vendors and how we even share our resources, because we're a community, and so therefore that is where the power rests. The Ministry of Home Affairs will not continue to we will not sit still. We will continue to move. We will continue to evolve. And I want to thank the ministry and our team for their collective efforts in ushering and ensuring that today was a success. And I would invite you to actually give them a round of applause for their work for today. Led by a team of dedicated public officers and our PS, Ms. Pandora Glassford, I am grateful that they have come along the journey that has said, although we do not and have not done it this way before, it's possible and we will go out and step out together. So I really thank them for that. So today marks the beginning of a new path forward, and that we now have accepted and we leave here knowing that a more affordable Bermuda should be an obligation, not just for government, not just for industry, but for all of us. So thank you. The days ahead will be marked with conviction. I invite you to still visit the commitment board that is listed outside. That is a symbol of our presence here today. And I thank you for sticking through what has been a very long but insightful day. So thank you.